Hey, what is up, y'all? It's your boy AJ Trip, coming at you with another reaction video. This one, 25 mysterious deaths that would never be able to explain. This comes from our good friends over at List 25. If you have not subscribed to them, I think you should go over there and should. They do great work. A lot of funny lists, a lot of intriguing lists, a lot of lists that make you go, and then you have these lists, just the wow, right? So let's go ahead and let's check this out.
It's hard to let go of the mysterious deaths that we'll never be able to explain. While armchair detectives certainly can become obsessed, imagine the torment unsolved deaths inflict on the families and police closely connected to the case. Be warned, these creepy unsolved deaths are quite grisly and explicit, so naturally viewer discretion is advised. I'm Mike with List 25, and here are 25 mysterious deaths that we will never be able to explain. Being in serious financial debt, Alfred Rouse planned to fake his death and get out of town. He picked up a stranger on the side of the road and planned to have him killed by setting his car on fire. Around the same time, a man named William Briggs left his home for a doctor's appointment and was never heard of again. People thought Briggs was the man Rouse killed, but recent DNA evidence concluded it wasn't Briggs. 24. On October 3, 1849, in Baltimore, Edgar Allen Poe was found lying in a gutter in disarray and delirious. Poe spent his next 4 days in fits of delirium and hallucinations. Officially, he died of phrenitis, or swelling of the brain, but no one understands how he got in such a state. Theories abound, from murder and flu to rabies and alcohol poisoning. 23. A notable character actor with 110 credits under his belt, Albert Dekker spent most of his life in Hollywood, building a successful career. At 62, his fiancée found him in his Hollywood apartment bathroom, naked and dead, hanging with a leather belt around his neck. He had a scarf around his eyes, a ball gag in his mouth, and his hands were cuffed behind his back.
Oh boy.
Doctors ruled it an accidental death by autoerotic asphyxiation. Except, here's where it gets even weirder. The bathroom door was locked from the inside with a chain, and there were no other exits. How could he have done all of that to himself without someone else, and how did he even lock the door? 22. In 1947, Elizabeth Short, nicknamed the Black Dahlia, was a 22-year-old Hollywood hopeful. A woman found her naked body posed, completely severed in half and mutilated on January 15th near Leimert Park. While many have claimed to know the killer, nothing has been totally conclusive. 21. A famous landscape painter in the early 20th century, Tom Thompson loved to paint the scenery at Algonquin Park. On July 8, 1917, his canoe was found turned over. It had some maple syrup, jam, and a rubber sheet, but the painter's body was nowhere to be found. Since then, countless speculation has swirled about his mysterious death, including foul play and just bad luck, but no one really knows what happened to him. 20. Julia Wallace's death in 1931 has fascinated crime writers for decades, with many claiming they figured out who killed her. Her husband, William Wallace, works as an insurance agent. On January 20th, he received a call from a man named R.M. Qualtrough to go to 25 Menlove Gardens East the following evening. Realizing he'd been pranked, he came back to his house to find his wife brutally bludgeoned to death. Wallace had been tried and convicted of the murder, with many believing he staged it. But later he was exonerated as there wasn't enough evidence to truly convict him. No one was convicted, and the mystery remains. 19. The identity of Dorado Jane Doe, also known as Mercedes, remains a big mystery. We do know she was an exotic dancer and prostitute in Arkansas who supposedly sent money back to her 2 kids. The only person who knows her true identity is both her lover and her killer, James Ice McAlphin. He gunned her down in a seedy Arkansas motel, but he won't talk. We don't even know if she really had kids, or if she made the story up. 18. In 1875, a barrister named Charles Bravo married Florence Ricardo. 4 months in, and Charles was rushed to the hospital and died of poisoning. The three suspects were Florence, the housekeeper Mrs. Cox, and Dr. Gully. Mrs. Cox had 3 children, and Charles once threatened to fire her. Police noted she was oddly evasive and even lied about Charles, saying he wanted to commit suicide, which he did not. Dr. Gully was one of Florence's former lovers and was upset over her marrying Charles. A court determined Charles Bravo was murdered, but there wasn't enough evidence to point to a specific person.
17.
Found washed ashore on Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia in 1948, the Somerton Man, as he would later be called, has perplexed police and researchers for decades. Police found a secret pocket in the man's pants with some bizarre items. They found a piece of paper tightly wrapped up that read, "Tammen Shud." The phrase roughly translates, "the end." Later, a businessman came forward with a book that he claimed was thrown into his car. At the end of the book, the phrase "Tammen Shud" was ripped from the pages. On the back of the book were 5 lines of letters and a phone number. Police tracked the phone number down and spoke with a young nurse, but she claimed to not know the man, despite looking suspicious. In the end, the case went cold and hasn't been solved since.
16.
The Isdalen Valley in Norway is also called Death Valley for its long reputation of suicides and falling accidents. But that name took on a new meaning when a man and his 2 daughters found a burnt, dead body in an out-of-the-way spot. Oddly, her body was burned on the front and not the back. Anything indicating her identity was removed or erased. Then they found unclaimed suitcases at Bergen's luggage department. They found out she used the name Fenella Lorch at a hotel, but learned it wasn't her real name. She had been using several names with several passports. Witnesses claim they saw her speaking to 2 German military officers. Her autopsy concluded she committed suicide, but many find that hard to believe.
15.
It was 1956 in Chicago, just a few days after Christmas, when the Grimes sisters, Barbara, 15, and Patricia, 13, begged their mother to let them go on a bus trip to see Love Me Tender, Elvis Presley's first movie. A month later, a construction worker discovered their dead, frozen bodies. They concluded the girls died from freezing temperatures. Rumors swirled about what the girls had been up to, including going out drinking with secret lovers and hanging out with drifters. The case grew cold as time went on.
14.
A little over 100 years ago, in the small town of Villisca, Iowa, a man with an axe came into the Moore residence with brutal intent. It was midnight, and the man came through the unlocked back door and went up the stairs to where Jay Moore slept next to his wife. The man first bludgeoned Jay's head and quickly did the same to his wife. He calmly went to their children's rooms and killed them with the axe as well. Rather than leaving, he stuck around, going back up and beating Jay's head with the axe 30 more times, and did the same with the rest of the family. It's believed he stayed in the house for hours, until leaving around 5 in the morning, locking the door behind him. Several suspects went to trial, but no conviction was made.
13.
David Bacon was a rising star in Hollywood in 1943, but his star fell fast and hard when witnesses saw his car careening off the road and into a bean field. When they went to help him, they saw his car was soaked with blood. He begged them for help, and they asked him what had happened, but he died before they got any answers. He'd been stabbed to death with a 6-inch blade.
12.
After leaving a dance hall in a Parisian suburb, Leticia Toro headed for a bus on May 16, 1937. She arrived at the Porte de Charenton and boarded the first-class car bound for central Paris. It was empty. Barely a minute later, passengers came aboard the first-class car to find Toro dead. Police discovered the striking woman was also an informant for a detective agency called Agence Rouge. When police raided the terrorist organization's hideout, those arrested claimed they knew Toro and had her killed. However, the mystery remains why the police never arrested them for the crime and how anyone killed her when the train car was totally empty.
11.
When Karen Silkwood got a job as a metallography technician at Cimarron Plutonium Plant, little did she know where it would lead. She joined the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Union and became part of the bargaining committee, put in charge to investigate health and safety issues. In 1974, she testified to the Atomic Energy Commission that she found serious violations of health and safety issues. Not soon after, she discovered she had 400 times the legal limit of plutonium in her system, even though she'd never handled dangerous items as part of her job. She decided to go public with all her findings, and was en route to see a New York Times reporter when her car went off the road and hit a culvert, killing her. When quaaludes were found in her car and bloodstream, supporters noted the skid marks in the road and questioned how she could have fallen asleep if she hit the brakes. Even more suspicious, the documents in her car she was going to show the New York Times reporter were gone. The plant shut down in 1975.
10.
Born in 1953, Eugene ONeill started writing novels, and after getting passed over 6 times, finally got a book deal to research for his new book. He'd infiltrated an Indiana militia. On December 7, 1996, ONeill was found hanging out of a window with a rope around his neck, 14 stories above Michigan Avenue in Chicago. Inside the hotel room, he had $481 in cash, brass knuckles, 3 discs with his latest unpublished novel, and an unused .38 caliber pistol. Inside the unpublished manuscript was a scene of a crime writer who gets thrown out of a window with a noose around his neck by the Indiana militia. Did he commit suicide? Or maybe he was experimenting with the story and took things too far. Or maybe the Indiana militia killed him just like he wrote in the story. We'll never know.
9.
Multi-millionaire Harry Oakes was a noted philanthropist and gold prospector. He was staying in the Bahamas during a violent tropical storm when someone murdered him. His body was discovered by friend Harold Christie. It had been doused in gasoline and set aflame, but the winds from the storm through the window blew it out so that he wasn't entirely engulfed. He was covered in feathers and 4 puncture wounds were above his left ear. Corruption and a sloppy investigation allowed for the killer to get away. And while there were plenty of suspects, no one was ever caught.
8.
Swedish diplomat and UN Secretary General Dag Hammer Holt was called the greatest statesman of our century by John F. Kennedy. Tragically, at age 56, he was killed in a plane accident. While the plane crash was thought to be pilot error, many disagreed, saying it was an assassination. With little evidence to prove the theory, the case went cold. That is, until recently. UN officials have reopened investigations to further examine the case.
7.
In 1932, Lilly Lindstrom was a Swedish prostitute who did most of her work in her small and dark apartment, typical of what you might expect in her Atlas neighborhood of Stockholm. Inside her apartment, the police found a grisly scene. Laying on her bed naked, she was face down with all of her clothes folded neatly on a chair next to her. She died from numerous blows of a blunt object to her head. But, even more disturbingly, her entire body was drained of blood, and saliva was found in her neck. No one ever found the killer, and he had since been named the Atlas Vampire.
6.
Mary Money's dead body was found at 10:55 p.m. on September 24, 1905, near Merstham Tunnel in England. Her body was horribly beaten, bruised, and mutilated. Initially, authorities thought she went there to commit suicide, but the rag down her throat ruled that out. Since her purse was gone from the scene, some speculate she had been robbed, and the struggle led to her death. We'll never really know.
5.
Gunther Stoll was a paranoid man living in Germany, constantly talking about how they were out to get him. One day, in the presence of his wife, he stands up and says, "I got it! Now I understand!" He writes down Yogtsi and leaves. He shows up in an old lady's house at 1 a.m. wanting to talk to her. He said, "Horrible incidents will take place tonight." Of course, she didn't let him in. 2 hours later, a truck driver found Stoll's damaged car in a ditch off of Autobahn 45 near Hagen Sud. Stoll was naked inside and said there were men with him, but they left. Unfortunately, he died at the hospital. Later, they found out he had been driven over to the car he was found in by another car while he was naked. No one knows who killed him, who the men were, or more importantly, what Yogtsi means.
4.
Up in the cold Antarctic tundra, Australian astrophysicist Rodney Marks suddenly and mysteriously died at Amundsen Scott Station in the year 2000. When his body arrived in New Zealand, an autopsy report found he had died of methanol poisoning. After investigating and interviewing 49 people who had been at the scene, police concluded his death wasn't the result of suicide or accidental poisoning. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough evidence to determine a killer, and many have called it the first murder at the South Pole.
3.
Danny Casolaro was an investigative reporter with tons of friends. He was found in a bathroom with his wrist slashed with a razor blade in a bathtub full of blood. He even left a suicide note, and the room showed no signs of forced entry or struggle. However, his family wasn't notified of his death for 2 days, and they mentioned that he was afraid of needles and blood tests. He also told them he was close to breaking a big case that would reveal massive corruption in the Department of Justice. And all those documents and papers he had that proved his case, they were nowhere to be found. While investigating the department, he uncovered a massive network of corrupt agents that he called the Octopus, but they were onto him and began calling him with death threats. A week before he died, he told his brother Tony about it, and that if there was an accident, he shouldn't believe it. So, did he commit suicide, or was the so-called octopus involved? 2. It was 1938 in Kingston, Pennsylvania, when Margaret Martin went missing. She landed an interview with a sandy-haired and slightly overweight man. The last anyone saw her alive was when she entered a black sedan. When she didn't return from her appointment, her parents reported her missing. 4 days later, a hunter 25 miles from Kingston found a body in a burlap sack. It was Margaret. Despite numerous rumors and theories, the murderer was never found. 1. Daughter of a 1937 diplomat, Pamela Warner had been found dead and mutilated in China near a watchtower by Old Peking. Lying half-naked, her skull was crushed, her torso cut open, and most of her major organs removed. No blood was at the scene because she had been entirely drained of her blood. Despite Chinese inspectors' best efforts, little was discovered of the murderer because of the Second Sino-Japanese War and a flood of refugees into the country. Enjoying our lists? Be sure to click that subscribe button on the bottom right and the notification bell so you don't miss out on new ones every Monday through Friday. Share them with friends and help us consistently conciliate curiosity. And if you want even more lists, check out these videos here or just head to our website at list25.com.
It might have been a bad idea for me. I started to get creeped out about number 20, and I couldn't. Again, all those are they're interesting and you just go, wow. But man, post your comments down below. Tell me what you guys think. Like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. This is your boy AJ Tripp signing off. As always, be good to each other, y'all. Be careful out there. I am out.